From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D for 3. Derek, we love basketball history, and it's even more special when we're able to witness it ourselves. Plenty of great memories in our minds this week, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, on today's show, we will be discussing I remember where I was when it happened. Basketball plays, games, and announcements. This was also a community question, so we will be getting to those responses later in the show. But first, Andrew, let's go over our memories. Why don't you start?
So, I'm going to start off with one that's not particularly special to me personally. Not a Bulls memory or a Michael Jordan memory, obviously, but the Malice at the Palace. I was watching that game. I kind of turned away as it got out of hand. I was working on the computer, had my back to the TV, turned around in the final seconds, saw that it hadn't turned into a close game after all, and then the fight breaks out. The brawl happens. What a wild thing to see live.
Yeah, and what's crazy about that is just the fan involvement. And, you watch something like that and you're wondering, is a fan going to get hurt? Who's going to get suspended? And, of course, multiple players got lengthy suspensions due to that incident. And I don't think it was a good look on the sport at the time. I don't think it was a good look for the NBA. And obviously measures were put in place after that incident to, try to prevent it from happening again.
And the crazy thing about it was just how it kept escalating. Because we've seen scuffles before, we've seen interactions with fans that shouldn't happen. But the way it just kept escalating, and Artest going over, lying on the scorer's table, then another drink is thrown, and it just keeps going. They're spilling into the stands, they're fighting with fans down on the court, confronting Jermaine O'Neal, doing the Ali shuffle, and almost getting his clock cleaned for that, the fan who did that. Fortunately, Jermaine O'Neal slipped, but yeah, just the way it spiraled out of control.
There's a difference between Barkley throwing a basketball at Shaq during a game and then them two wrestling, right, on the court, because there's no fan involvement. That's just between Barkley and Shaq. It can't escalate really further than that. The fan involvement is what makes that so crazy. My earliest memory watching hoops was the 1991 Slam Dunk Contest, and I was sitting in front of my TV, glued to the screen, sitting on the floor, actually, on one of those glorious rugs, Andrew, the glorious rugs of the 80s and 90s. And it was D. Brown facing off against Sean Kemp in the finals. D. Brown pumped up his Reeboks, executed the no-look dunk, and many other excellent jams. The no-look dunk wasn't even his best dunk in that contest. He had several other better jams, but that one had the most fanfare. It was the most unique. So that's what everybody remembers. But anyways, did all these great dunks, won the slam dunk contest, and I was so excited and I was so happy with the result that I asked my parents and two brothers to only call me D from that point on. And not only was that wish granted, the rest of my family did the same. So my grandparents, my aunt, etc. I was just called D, and I'm still called D by everybody who's still alive in my family. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. And I just remember that moment sitting there on the floor in my pajamas, watching that dunk contest and just being like, this is amazing.
Talk about the thing to get you into basketball. One of the best dunk contests of the 90s, I think. Sean Kemp versus D. Brown. Yeah, it's been way too long since I rewatched the 91 dunk contest.
Yeah, I mean, he had some incredible dunks. He had windmill, one-handed. I believe he had a two-handed windmill. He had a back slam. He had a two-ball dunk where he had one sitting on the back of the rim, and he pushed that in and dunked the other one with his other hand. It was just a ridiculous display. And only 6'1", an inch shorter than I am. What an incredible vertical. On one of the backs of his cards that I had, I might still have it actually downstairs, it stated that his vertical was measured at one point at 47 inches. I don't know if that's real or not, but it says it on the back of the card, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely tremendous leaper. Iconic performance in the dunk contest. Kind of feel bad for Sean Kemp. He had some good outings 3 or 4 years in a row there in the dunk contest. But yeah, never quite got over the hump. Was always outdone by a shorter player. So, back in the 90s, it was kind of hard for me to catch NBA stuff live because I was mostly at school. And when evening games are played in the States, that is morning to afternoon in Australia. But I do remember watching Game 5 of the 97 NBA Finals, having recorded it the night before, avoiding spoilers throughout the day. A bit easier in the pre-social media, pre-everyone is online 24/7 times, Derek, when you actually had to dial up to the internet to get online. In fact, at the time, didn't even have the internet yet. We didn't get it until August 97, our family. But watching that game on tape, and when you don't know the results, it might as well be live, basically. Watching MJ turn in that performance, it is the flu game. Of course, it's really the food poisoning game, but the flu game is the name that stuck. Just watching him battle, feeling so sick, playing through that illness, performing so well, coming through in the clutch, hitting that big clutch bucket to put them ahead for good. Yeah, I was already a huge basketball and MJ fan by that point, but if I wasn't, that would have absolutely solidified it.
It's funny with everything that came out after, kind of proving that it wasn't the flu game, that it was truly a food poisoning game, and that it had to do with pizza that was ordered, apparently, and whatnot. But yeah, it's funny that the flu game name still stuck to that event. But yeah, what an incredible performance, sick or not.
Absolutely. And people kind of treat that as a gotcha these days, don't they? Oh, we didn't actually have the flu, but we knew that. That was reported, like you said, in the wake of that happening. It's just that Marv Albert said flu-like symptoms in the pregame, so the name stuck, because it's a bit more catchy than the food poisoning game.
So my second memory was once again sitting on the floor in front of my TV, this time watching the first round series between the Celtics and Pacers, specifically Game 5, which was the elimination game, as back then the first round was a best-of-5 series. This is the game where Bird dove for a loose ball, shattered his face on the floor, and he ended up having a broken cheekbone and a concussion as a result of his face hitting the floor on that play. Thought he was going to be out for the rest of the game. It was horror in our house because we were like, no way we can let trash-talking Chuck Person beat us in the playoffs, and it's not looking good right now. So Bird comes through the tunnel, comes back into the game, the announcement, and here comes Larry Bird, and the crowd goes absolutely nuts. We were screaming in my house when he, came through the tunnel and re-entered the game. And the Celtics ended up winning that game 124-121. But I just remember just the yelling and the excitement between myself, my two brothers, and my parents when it was announced that he was coming back into the game.
I can only imagine how amazing that would be to watch live, because I learned about that game, watched those highlights years later on a home video. I want to say it was Guts and Glory that profiled that, but just the voiceover for that segment saying something like, Larry Bird had nothing left to prove, nothing to lose, except his pride. And, just goosebumps when you hear that. The music swells, down he comes, it shows what he did afterwards. And yeah, that's exciting enough watching that recap. But to see it live, yeah, that would have been truly special.
I kind of miss feeling that way about a team and a player, right? And I think you probably feel the same watching the NBA now. And I also feel like there's probably not a player today that would have come back into the game after what he experienced, right? I just think there was a different level of toughness to Larry. And that was on full display there.
What's that famous quote of his? I won't sit on the bench with no broken fingernail. He certainly didn't. So it's always really special when you get to see one of these iconic highlights that makes the highlight reels for years to come happen live. And there was one early in the 2006 season, Heat versus Suns, where Dwayne Wade gets a block towards the end of the third quarter, collects it, and puts up a shot from three-quarter court, and it goes in. As soon as I saw that, I knew that's going to be on all the highlight reels for a long time. That's going to be the number one play on NBA Action this week, because I was still watching NBA Action at the time. Yeah, obviously highlights are cool to see whenever, but when you can actually see something like that at the time, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I have a memory that I'm going to share a little bit later related to a current player that hit one of the most amazing shots I've ever seen in my life, in person, on TV, hell, in video games, etc. And I had a feeling once that shot went in that this person's legacy was even more cemented, and that it was going to be on every highlight reel, and we were going to be hearing about it for years. And I'll get into that in a little bit. The next memory on my end that I wanted to share is related to the 1992 NBA Finals, specifically Game 1. Once again, sitting on the floor in front of the TV, my dad was rooting hard for the Trailblazers, and specifically against Michael Jordan. I remember during the first half, he kept calling Jordan a ball hog, stating that the team that plays more together will win the championship. And, basically stating, you guys better be rooting for the Trailblazers, not MJ, not the Bulls, etc. And of course, Andrew, this is the shrug game, right? Where Jordan hit 6 threes and had 35 first half points.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you that shut my dad up real quick, after the first half, he didn't do much talking. That would be an understatement. But I just remember him standing behind me and my brother while we were watching this game, just constantly trash talking Jordan and just the feeling that Jordan was going to kill the Trailblazers. And even at my age at the time, I just knew that. I was like, Jordan's going to come out here and Dad's going to shut up real quick. And it happened.
Yeah, again, another game that I saw many years later, both highlights and the full game, on that Ultimate Jordan set. Rightfully so. And it is just an incredible performance. And that's the thing that people forget about, is that as popular as Michael Jordan was, like all the popular players, like all the great players throughout history, not everyone is a fan. If those players are killing your favorite team over and over again, and I touched on this last week in Way Back Wednesday when I talked about Kobe Bryant's 81-point game, these great players that just torch your team and lead their team to victory, leave you watching your favorite team lose, yeah, they do have a sizable group of haters, or certainly people who are cheering against them.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, my dad liked to go against the grain. Like, if there was somebody super popular, it's like, we want this other guy to win. I remember that in tennis, Pete Sampras would be the favorite. And he was loved by so many, and he didn't have any conflicts or any drama or anything like that. And when he would go up against somebody like Andre Agassi, who had a whole bunch of drama and who was the underdog and had kind of a unique look and was more of a rogue, right? The way his personality was and what he did outside of tennis, he would root hard for Agassi. And in this case, I don't think my dad liked the Jordan fanfare. I think he wanted to see Jordan be taken down for size and whatnot. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, people love to cheer for the underdog, absolutely. Or go against the grain, as you said. And I can't say that I haven't cheered against Kobe or LeBron over the years. And of course, back in the day, as I said, a lot of people did cheer against Michael Jordan. But it doesn't mean that ultimately you can't appreciate their skill and legacy. And I did talk about Kobe's 81-point game last week because it was the 20th anniversary. And wow, Derek, 20 years, flying by since that. But of course, his tragic passing in 2020, I remember waking up very early, picking up my phone, going on Instagram of all things, and seeing a tribute, and thinking, what? A tribute to Kobe Bryant? He died? And then going onto the web and actually looking up the news and finding out what happened. And that was really shocking, to say the least. You don't expect something like that to happen, to put it mildly. And, he was set to go into the Hall of Fame that year, which he did. Many of us probably thinking about the kind of speech he would make and seeing him joke around with his contemporaries and maybe take some playful shots at Shaq and so forth. Yeah, I certainly remember in the early hours of the morning seeing that news.
Yeah, and can you imagine how big that would be on social media today? Because that game was actually 20 years ago. January 22nd, 2006 is when that took place. So crazy how fast time flies. Next for me is Larry Bird's retirement ceremony, which took place on February 4th, 1993. This had our household in tears. I was in the same spot on the floor in the living room, and my dad was sitting in the chair. My mom was on the couch, and I remember my brothers were both there as well. And we were all in tears. It was a pretty big deal when Bird tore off Magic Johnson's Lakers jacket to reveal a Celtics shirt underneath. It was just all the stories, the talk of the rivalry, and the sending off of a legend. It was just a really big deal in our house, and I just remember just a lot of crying and a lot of memory sharing.
Yeah, there's a service that sells classic games, Pontel, to people around the world. I don't think it's available in the US. They're just the international distributor of classic games. It's how I've got to see a lot of games from before I was a fan, to go back and watch those classic games. And they actually sell that retirement ceremony on VHS and now DVD.
And the next one I want to share real quick, and I'll throw it back to you, is when it was announced that Reggie Lewis passed away. It was announced at 7:30 p.m. on July 27th, 1993. And obviously he passed away at the age of 27. And we saw the announcement on the news. He had collapsed earlier in the day during an off-season practice session at Brandeis University in Massachusetts. And to say that Reggie Lewis was loved in our house is an understatement. We were a big fan of him in our house. It was his demeanor. It was, the way he carried himself on and off the court. It was his abilities on the court. He was our all-star. Right. And when we found out that he passed away, I remember sitting there again in front of my TV, and we just lost it in the house. And we absolutely despised and hated Dr. Gilbert Mudge. He was the doctor that gave Lewis the okay to return to basketball activities, which is why he was shooting around at Brandeis University that day. So I just remember just the hate. We would constantly talk about Gilbert Mudge in our house and how much we hated him and how he was responsible for Lewis's death and whatnot. Of course, I was a really young kid at the time. And, later in life, I've looked up that situation, and I still have some of those similar feelings. He should never have been allowed to return to basketball activities. And I think that it was major malpractice by Dr. Gilbert Mudge to allow him to return to those activities.
Yeah, just a tragic situation. Drazen Petrovic, around the same time, very quickly a 1-2 punch of rising stars in the NBA gone way too soon. And of course, it's not just about basketball. It is two young men who lost their lives way too soon. But yeah, terrible for basketball. And obviously there's been other situations with players who shouldn't have been out on the court, either getting bad advice or defying advice or whatever. Of course, Pistol Pete, that was a tragedy too. And it turned out that he had that congenital heart defect. And I was reading that his son passed away at a similar age many years later. So here's one that you'll remember, I'm sure quite vividly, Derek, when the Celtics acquired Ray Allen at the 2007 draft, because I was actually at the 2007 draft, was flown into New York for the NBA Live 08 community event. They took us to the draft at Madison Square Garden. That was very exciting. Very exciting to turn up to Madison Square Garden in a big limo, Derek, and people turning and looking at the limo. Oh, who is it? Who is it? That's got to be someone special. Oh, it's a bunch of gamer geeks. And that was kind of funny to see people disappointed that we were getting out of the limo and not somebody special. But yeah, very cool to be at that draft. See Joakim Noah get drafted by the Bulls, of course, and that was special. But I remember the trade of Ray Allen from the Supersonics to the Celtics, because one of the other guys at the event, Brian Pasta Padre, he was a huge Sonics fan. And there had been rumors about Ray Allen being traded to the Celtics, so he was kind of dreading seeing that become official. And I remember when that trade was announced, just looking over at him, and he had a Supersonics hat on, because they got us all draft caps, and he had the Sonics cap. He just raised his cap, like, yep, thank you, Ray. That's it. And of course, that was the last season, 2007-2008, turned out to be the last season for the Supersonics in Seattle before relocating to OKC and becoming the Thunder, of course. But yeah, very memorable being at that draft, seeing that happen, seeing Greg Oden get drafted, getting into a lift, getting into an elevator in the hotel where they were putting us up with all the draftees, actually getting into the elevator, finding myself face-to-face with Greg Oden. I say face-to-face. He's 7 foot, I'm 6'3". I've never felt so short as an adult, Derek, as that. But a lot of great memories of that draft. But seeing, Kevin Durant get drafted, Greg Oden, Joakim Noah, seeing that big trade, yeah, very memorable. And the fact that I was actually not just watching the draft on TV, but actually at the draft, yeah, very cool.
Some people probably forget the details around that trade and how things transpired. June 28th, 2007 is when that trade took place. And it was, the ESPN headline was Sonics Allen traded to Celts for Wally, West, and Green. And it wasn't until a month later that the Celtics got KG. Kevin Garnett was traded to the Boston Celtics on July 31st, 2007. And there were a lot of players involved in that trade. But yeah, the Celtics didn't get KG until a month later. For all we knew at the time, it was Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, and then we gave up pieces for Ray. So yeah, interesting stuff there.
Yeah, and around the draft, there was all that talk of KG possibly going to the Lakers or the Suns. The Celtics were supposedly in play, but yeah, that was a very interesting offseason.
Next for me, 1994. I was at home and my dad was dropping my mother off at work. He heard over the radio that the Celtics signed Dominique Wilkins. So excited, he didn't realize how fast he was going and promptly got stopped and received a speeding ticket. One of my brothers were in the car with him. I heard all about it when they got home. It was also the first I had heard the news about the Celtics signing Dominique. We were big Dominique Wilkins fans in the house, so naturally I was incredibly excited.
And a stint that is remembered by a couple of video games there, set in the 95 season. And you've talked about that before, the excitement of getting Neek. And as you noted, he wasn't in the best shape, perhaps not as motivated, kind of lost his mojo a bit, I think, after being traded from the Hawks. Didn't want to leave the Hawks. Probably should have ended his career there, obviously. But yeah, definitely had some moments for the Celtics. Some very cool highlights, actually, on YouTube.
Yeah, it was pretty disappointing and not as many highlights as I would have expected or wanted. I think he came into the season a little bit out of shape, a little bit overweight for him. Turned into kind of jump shot Neek and not consistent jump shot Neek either, and was even benched for a few games during the season due to his effort on defense and not rolling with the offense and whatnot. I think he averaged around 17 points a game that season. We did surprise the Orlando Magic in the playoffs and took a game off of them, but then were swiftly defeated. And yeah, that was it for Neek. He never wore Celtic green again. And it's funny because a couple of years later, he signed with the Spurs as a free agent. And that's the Neek I wish we had gotten. He was more explosive athletically, looked like he was in better shape. That's the Neek I was kind of expecting with the Celtics.
Did you get to see any games live that year? Because from memory, that was the last year that they were in the original Boston Garden.
I didn't. The first game I ever saw live, actually, was Celtics versus Clippers. And it was at the Fleet Center. And it was during the 2000-2001 season. And the reason why I remember this game is because I was playing for the basketball team at the time. And the team got taken to this game, and it was such a massive deal that Darius Miles was playing, and we had a guy on our team that was a huge Darius Miles fan. He was so pumped about going to see him play. And what I remember mostly from that game is that it was actually Michael Olowokandi that was the most impressive, believe it or not, and not Darius Miles. But yeah, we had pretty decent seats for that game, and it was a basketball team trip in high school.
Future Celtic Olowokandi.
Yeah, and that's not memorable either. Even less memorable than the Dominique Wilkins stint, of course. Dwayne Shinsius was also a Celtic at one point, and yeah, that was short-lived as well.
So my next memory, kind of building off your Neek memory, actually, and this is a preview of tomorrow's Way Back Wednesday, actually, but 30 years ago, on January 27th, 1996, I bought NBA Jam Tournament Edition for PC, and that was, Derek, my very first basketball game that I bought and owned, and I was already a casual basketball fan, kind of in 95, leading into 96, but getting NBA Jam Tournament Edition, playing it daily, pretty much, or certainly as much as I could, starting to play basketball at school with friends is when my basketball fandom really kicked into high gear, when I was truly minted as a hardcore hoophead in 1996. So this is kind of the 30th anniversary of me becoming a big basketball fan, Derek. So even though that's basketball gaming more than real basketball, it's all kind of connected, really, because basketball games, I think, got a lot of us, certainly internationally, into watching the real thing as well, and learning about some of the players. And yes, NBA Live 96 PC, which I got not too long after that, was a better education as far as accuracy of depicting the players, full rosters, etc. But I'd already started collecting basketball cards and watching a bit of basketball here and there, seeing highlights, seeing clips, whatever. But yeah, 30 years ago, getting NBA Jam Tournament Edition for PC, really getting into that game, really lit the fuse on my basketball fandom.
Yeah, I'm not going to be discussing basketball video game memories on this show. I've done it on so many past shows, related to my experiences with Jordan versus Bird, my early experiences with Double Dribble, Tecmo Super NBA Basketball, NBA Jam, the original NBA 2K, NBA Fast Break 98, all those games. But I will say that those experiences mean a lot to me, and basketball video games mean a lot to me because it was part of my connection to the game, and it's part of how I learned about the game, about the players, all of that. I have so many memories of performances on the virtual hardwood, probably close to as many as I've seen on TV related to the real hardwood. So yeah, I don't blame you for bringing that one up at all. Next for me is the return of Magic Johnson on January 30th, 1996. What a huge deal in our house and in the basketball world. However, when I first saw Magic take the court, I'm not going to lie, I was like, he looks fat. Point blank, that's what I was thinking at the time. He looks out of shape. He doesn't look like he's going to be able to move that well. Looks way bigger than he did, after his first retirement, after the 90-91 season. I was kind of worried about it. But then he got into motion. And in that game, he had 19 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds in 27 minutes. Lakers won that game. He joined a good Lakers team that was performing pretty well. So I was like, if he comes back and he's in good enough shape, he could help them, and maybe they make a deep run in the playoffs. You never know. I felt like the West was, pretty wide open that year. And that's the game where they were playing against the Warriors, and he did that ball fake on Sprewell, and Sprewell looked the other way, and then Magic laid it in. What an electric scene. What a great thing to watch. And yeah, I just remember, sitting there in front of the TV watching that game and just being blown away at how he was impacting that game.
It's funny because it's not forgotten that he made that comeback in 96. But with 96 being that huge year for the Bulls, 72-10, the fourth title, the return to form for MJ and the Bulls, there's a lot of subplots that kind of get overshadowed. And it's wild that that happened in the same year, Magic's comeback.
Yeah, I wish he had played one more season. I think it would have been great for Kobe. Kobe's rookie year was in 96, 97, and Magic could have mentored him, could have been a positive influence on him. And I think I would have loved to see him take the court, even sparingly, with Shaq and Kobe. I think that would have been fun.
And again, what a great video game team. We've talked about that before. So as I said, 1996, the year that I really got into basketball, following along with the Bulls, watching them win that championship. And I remember seeing Game 6, or the end of Game 6, at my friend Danny's place. He'd recorded it as well, and I just happened to be there, so we watched his recording. Watching that game, watching them get back on top, seeing a team win the NBA championship for the first time, because again, this is my first time really following along with the NBA, seeing him go into the locker room, overcome with emotion, his first championship after his father's passing, and yeah, seeing the Bulls win and feeling that excitement, being able to experience something that I hadn't from the first three-peat, not watching the games and highlights until years afterwards, was obviously special and, further solidified my basketball fandom.
Yeah, it's hard to beat your favorite team or player, succeeding on the highest stage, and you just want it so bad, and they get the job done. My last mention for the show will be the Steph Curry 38-foot game-winning three that he hit against the Oklahoma City Thunder on February 27, 2016. The Warriors won this game by 3, 121-118. Curry tied the then NBA record with 12 three-pointers made in a single game and finished with 46 points. My brother and I were sitting in front of the TV. He had just recently moved in with me. He had been living in a different state, and we had decided to get an apartment together. And we're sitting there, and we just can't believe what we're seeing. He's on an island with Steven Adams, and he's shooting over him, nothing but net. Just the dribbling that was on display, the shooting that was on display, just the clutch moments in that game. And then to be capped off by a 38-foot three on the deepest part of the court, splash, nothing but net. Just the crowd reaction, his reaction, everything just blew us away. And I'll never forget our reaction. We couldn't believe what happened.
Yeah, I was watching that game live as well. And when he put that shot up, you just knew it was going in, didn't you? It's wild when that happens. You just get that feeling that, yes, this incredible shot is going in. And Steph Curry was starting to put up those really long bombs, you know, the logo threes, the hash mark threes. And he just puts that up. And for anyone else to be, why are you shooting it that early and from that distance? But again, you just saw him put it up and you're like, that's going in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the crazy part about that is look at the body language of the Thunder when Curry shot that shot. They knew it was going in.
Yeah.
They knew that a 38-foot bomb was going in. And they weren't happy, I don't think, with the contest on it from that deep, because it's like, it's Steph Curry. He can make this shot. But just the Thunder's reaction makes that moment even better.
And the final one that I'll mention before we get to the community responses, and I'm sure there'll be some there that jog our memory as well, the 96 Olympic basketball tournament at the Atlanta Games. Again, when games are being played in the evening in the US, it's morning and afternoon Australian time. And during the Olympics, our U6 teacher left the TV in the classroom so we could stay back and watch the basketball tournament and other highlights that were being shown during the day. And I remember watching the altercation between Shane Heal, the Hammer, and Charles Barkley, the chest bump. That was a big topic of discussion on the playground that week. We were all basketball crazed in 1996 at my school, playing every day for a while there, talking about it, collecting cards, playing basketball video games, obviously, you know, and the fact that Shane Heal wasn't intimidated and was having a pretty good shooting night as well. Yeah, that's always stuck out in my memory, and I remember our teacher doing that for us and letting us watch the games during recess and lunch.
Yeah, and look at you now. So, no, you're not in school anymore. No, you don't love the NBA like you once did, but you're still living every day thinking about basketball. And I think that's cool, right? And I think I'm very similar, you know, basketball video games, watching classic games, staying up to date on what's going on in basketball today. You know, I'm still playing in leagues. I still play in pickup when I can, etc. So, sure, times have changed, you know, our habits have changed, our responsibilities have changed, but yeah, you know, we still think about the game.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about our quibbles with the modern game quite recently on the NLSC podcast, of course, but when it comes to the sport in general and my memories of the sport and still having affection for the sport, you know, it's cheesy and cliche, but I have to quote the 90s slogan, I love this game. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So let's get to the community's responses. Again, I asked, name a remember where I was when it happened moment in basketball history, and this can be related to plays, games, or announcements. T Gentry at Bucky_T states, T-Mac scoring 13 points in 35 seconds on December 9th, 2004, Rockets versus Spurs. I remember watching it in the living room with my brother. It was a late game, too, because I was in Central Time. Yeah, what a crazy performance. And you thought the Rockets had absolutely no chance. And I watched that recently, again, actually on YouTube. And the commentators were even talking about it. They were like, you know, the Rockets are going to lose this one. And this makes them blah, blah, blah on the season, or et cetera. And it's like, yeah, stuff like that happens. It's completely unexpected, just miraculous performances. Yeah, you don't forget those.
Yeah, that competitive spirit. And look, that doesn't happen very often. Quite often those first couple of attempts to spark that comeback fail, and the game goes down as expected. But yeah, incredible performance. To be able to watch that live, I certainly remember it. I don't think I was watching that game. Certainly watched the highlights on SportsCenter, I believe, and read about it, and we talked about it in the forum. But yeah, one of the most iconic performances in NBA history.
Leo at Real Kiwi Bamba states, Game 2 of the 96 finals, Rodman grabbed a record 11 offensive rebounds. I was watching my first game, and I see this crazy guy with multicolored squiggles on his head, flying all over the court, seemingly winning the ball every time a shot was missed. Mesmerizing and unforgettable. Yeah, I mean, if Dennis Rodman is one of your first experiences watching basketball, you're in for a treat. And you can say what you want about Dennis Rodman, about the way he dressed, about the way he acted, about, his inability as a scorer, all of that. But if you want to watch somebody hustle, you want to watch somebody go all out, if you want to have somebody fight for every loose ball, Dennis Rodman's the guy that you want on your team, and he's the guy you're going to see doing all of that stuff.
Yeah, and his popularity was certainly rivaling MJ during that season. A bit of a rehabilitation of his image, so to speak, even though he was doing outlandish things. He was seen as a distraction in San Antonio. Traded for Will Perdue, of all players. Spurs just wanted to get rid of him. Turned out to be a genius move by the Bulls.
Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho, Live 01 Legend, states, I remember when LeBron announced his return to Cleveland and immediately had tears knowing the Cavs were going to win a championship within the next few years. He must have envisioned a future Draymond Green suspension. Just kidding. But at the same time, I'm sure that was a giant deal for LeBron fans and for Cleveland fans. And you got a ring out of it.
I mean, you don't need much clairvoyance ability to see a Draymond Green suspension coming, Draymond Green antics coming. But it's funny because I watched How I Met Your Mother, fan of that show, and there's a joke in the last couple of seasons about LeBron returning to the Cavaliers because Ted's character was from Ohio, and Robin makes a joke about, I wouldn't go to Cleveland for whatever LeBron's contract with the Heat was at that time. And then How I Met Your Mother wrapped up in early 2014, and a few months later, he returns to Cleveland. When that happened, I certainly wasn't expecting that. I figured he was going to stay with the Heat. I was wrong about him staying with Cleveland in 2010. Watched the decision like so many other people and saw him take his talents to South Beach. But yeah, that certainly caught me by surprise. I wasn't as surprised when he moved on to the Lakers subsequently in 2018. But yeah, a big deal for Cavs fans. I
wasn't surprised when he returned to Cleveland. You can't waste that I'm coming home moment. Right? What a big deal in the sports world. Roger Ward, the other Live 01 legend, states, when the Cavs won their championship, we rushed out of work and got to a bar just in time to see the whole second half. The atmosphere was electric. Yeah, huge deal for those guys.
Yeah, and I was watching those finals as well, watching them complete that 3-1 comeback. And as soon as Steph Curry made that ill-advised turnover late in the game, I think we all knew that the Cavaliers were going to do it.
Yeah, the famous meme where Steph Curry is throwing the trophy behind the back out of bounds as opposed to a ball. Yeah, that wasn't a great pass. Kind of a stupid decision at the time. Andrew at Andrew the X states, Ray Allen, corner 3, Game 6, 2013 NBA Finals. It was lunchtime on a workday in City. I found a local outdoor pub with a big screen and watched what should have been a Spurs title. I remember being frustrated before the free throw was taken, that Tim Duncan was taken out of the game when just needing a free throw. I was frustrated with Coach Pop when they made that play. Great work by Bosch and Ray Allen. All viewers, like 100, were in shock. Same deal again with LeBron's block and the Kyrie 3 I was watching at the end of the game at lunchtime. I enjoyed this one a lot more. Once again, we were all in awe. We'll never forget. Yeah, that Tim Duncan substitution will never make sense. But yeah, some memorable moments for him.
Yeah, and I was watching those finals as well. Will admit that I was cheering for the Spurs in that one, so very frustrating to see them let that victory slip away. But then in 2014, they really redeemed themselves, and of course, Patty Mills, the Aussie, had a great performance in Game 5, hitting all those threes, so that was satisfying.
Mike P for 3 at Mike Purchard, who had the number 2 highlight in this week's NLSC Top 10 Plays of the Week. Sadly, it was the passing of Kobe, his daughter, and the other passengers in that terrible accident. As I was working a late afternoon night shift and received a text about it, which I stopped what I was doing to check if it was real. The radio at work spoke about it all night. And yeah, I remember where I was when that news was broke as well. My brothers and I were actually playing NBA 2K17 when we heard about it, and then we were all jumping on our phones looking for updates. It was originally reported that Rick Fox was also involved in that accident.
That's right, yes.
So that was the early reports, and then it was revealed that he was not. But yeah, I remember where myself and my brothers were when we heard about that as well.
Yeah, like I said, that was one of mine, checking my phone and seeing a tribute come up in my Instagram feed, and then looking up more news about it. And yeah, I'd forgotten that Rick Fox was originally reported as being part of that, kind of irresponsible, got a lot of people worried, but in any case, certainly a tragic event.
And lastly, on Twitter, Mike Harshman at MKHarsh33 states, 1986 Sampson, buzzer beater over the Lakers to go to the NBA Finals, obviously, where it's inbounded to Ralph Sampson, and he catches it 10 to 12 feet away from the basket with his back to the basket with two hands, and basically shoots it behind his head, and it bounces in. Just an incredible shot. And Sampson, one of my favorite players of all time. I love going back and watching footage of him, just the way he moved, what he was able to do with his size and length. Unfortunately, after his first 4 seasons, he was plagued with injuries and never got to reach his full potential. But yeah, what an amazing player.
Yeah, and of course we've seen a lot of great highlights since we started watching basketball, but there were plenty of great moments that happened before we started watching basketball, so in that sense I can't really envy people that much, although there's always a bit of envy when people talk about being there for an iconic moment. You know, Jeff X in the forum, you know, he was there for the Knicks championships in the 70s, so he's got that on us and certainly his fellow Knicks fans, and shout out to Jeff X as always, longtime member of the community. But yeah, obviously I didn't get to see Ralph Sampson's shot live, but I've seen it in a lot of highlight compilations and documentaries about the history of the playoffs and NBA Finals. And yeah, that is a great game winner.
Moving over to Discord, Juicy Shack Meat states, because of time zones and lack of internet back in November 2004, I only knew of the Malice at the Palace while watching the local evening news at home. We were renting an old haunted house at the time while our original house was being renovated. The news was featured in the comedy segment to end the show and treated as a, quote, LOL, this funny moment happened at a basketball game, end quote. In hindsight, the incident had serious and unfunny ramifications across NBA history. And yeah, you brought up Malice at the Palace earlier, and like I stated, it made rules change in the NBA. It was kind of a scary moment in all reality, especially with that fan involved.
Absolutely. And again, just the way that it kept escalating. You know, Larry Brown got on the mic, tried to settle the fans down, just ended up throwing the mic down in disgust because they weren't listening at all. And like you said, it did change things in the NBA, but I suppose we're lucky it wasn't any worse.
So that's it for Discord. Do we have any other responses on other social media platforms?
We did have a few people weigh in on our Facebook page. Stephen says, May 31st, 1998, I was watching the Bulls-Pacers Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 when an F3 tornado came through my town. We lost power, and I had to listen to score updates every 15 minutes on KYW 1060, the local news radio station. I will forever link that playoff series with that tornado. Yeah, our memories certainly do link things in that way. What an incredible game, the Bulls pulling it off, obviously. But yeah, I'm glad you made it through that F3 tornado, and obviously a lot of people dealing with some weather over there in the States right now, Derek. Bit of snow.
Yeah, no tornadoes here, but right now we are in the middle of a snowstorm. It was 8 degrees Fahrenheit for the majority of the day. For those keeping score at home, that's negative 13 degrees Celsius. And so not only was it cold, but we got about a foot of snow today, and we're expected to get 8 to 10 more inches tomorrow. So no tornado, but yeah, we get hit with some pretty nasty snowstorms at times here in New England.
Sixth Man of the Year says, September 11th, 2001, very infamous date, obviously, Jordan was set to announce his second coming in the NBA. I remember watching this news, then a few minutes later, I think, one of the Twin Towers got hit. The announcement was postponed. Yeah, and of course, I remember that day, you know, being September 12th here in Australia, hearing that news and being so shocked by it. And of course, MJ had been talking about making that comeback, pushing that back a week or so. He makes his return and, of course, donates his salary to the victims of that tragedy.
Yeah, so George's return to the Wizards was a massive deal with my brothers and I. And of course, I remember his preseason game against the New Jersey Nets where he scored 41 points and had 6 rebounds and 2 assists. And they lost that game, 102-95. But just seeing him perform again in the NBA, it was a huge deal in our household.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a meme, like, oh, this is disappointing, like Jordan with the Wizards or whatever. You see that pop up on social media sometimes, that analogy. But you go back and look, and he was obviously dealing with knee problems, was 3 years older than he was when he last played for the Bulls, but definitely had his moments. He was getting up to dunk, he was just knocking down mid-range shots, he was having some fine games, and we've talked about this before, leading up to the injury that took him out for the rest of the 2002 season. Well, he did come back and try to play those 7 games off the bench, which was very weird to see. Also very weird to see him come off the bench for 15 games at the start of the 2003 season. And that didn't last very long either, because there's no way he should have been backing up Byron Russell at any point, quite frankly. But yeah, as weird and difficult and disappointing in some ways as it was to see him play for the Wizards as a Bulls fan, I've definitely come to appreciate those years more, because despite what people say, he did still have that MJ magic.
And yeah, I mean, he was an MVP candidate before the knee injury, before All-Star break. During the 01-02 season, there's articles out there that prove that his numbers were almost identical to prime T-Mac at that point, and he was really ramping it up and putting on some amazing performances, including game winners, before that All-Star break, before that knee injury. And it is unfortunate, because I think that they were poised to make a deep run in the playoffs before he hurt his knee. He had the Wizards at number 3 or number 4 in the Eastern Conference, and I would never bet against MJ in the playoffs.
Renee says, I was at the United Center when Shaq tried to knock Brad Miller's head off his shoulders. Ha. Yeah, I certainly remember that. That was a topic of discussion in the black and blue discus forums that we used to have at the NLSC. And I remember a couple of people making a speculative Brad Miller face patch, a face mod, that represented what it would have looked like if Shaq had connected.
I've been to countless NBA games, a couple dozen Celtics games, and whatnot, and I've never seen a fight. There was no fights at any of the games that I've gone to, but that must have been wild to see.
And finally, we have a more recent one. Jared says, probably the Luka trade for me. I'd gotten home from watching Jokic get a triple-double against my Hornets, and I was checking Blue Sky and Instagram like normal, when the Shams poster on Blue Sky showed Shams reporting the trade, followed by the operator of the bot being skeptical he didn't get hacked. And I certainly remember that. That was just last year, of course. And when I saw that posted in our Discord, actually, Derek, I had to go to social media and double-check and check other news sites to see whether it was actually legit. Because it was such a bizarre deal to happen. And even to this day, obviously cost Nico Harrison his job, ultimately. I don't think anybody's ever really been able to justify it.
Yeah, the crazy thing about that trade is there was no lead up to it. There were no rumors, right? Nobody knew that the Mavericks were trying to get rid of Luka. Nobody knew that Anthony Davis was going to be moved either at that time. And then all of a sudden, boom, a massive blockbuster trade where Dallas gets rid of a player in his young prime to a Western Conference powerhouse. And when I say powerhouse, I don't mean, the team record specifically at that time. I mean, it's the Los Angeles Lakers. Andrew, it's the big market, it's the history, all of that. And I don't think anybody saw that trade coming, and that's what makes it so unique, in my opinion.
Yeah, considering how many rumors leak these days, and have for years, obviously, that was kind of unprecedented, and a big reason why it took us by surprise.
So thank you to everybody that responded to this week's community question. A lot of great responses, a lot of great memories, and many more to come, whether it be on the virtual hardwood or real basketball related.
Yeah, and like I said, it's always special when you can witness history, kind of be a part of history, but I do love NBA history, obviously, going back, seeing those memorable moments, those iconic moments. Like I said, I got goosebumps watching that segment on the Larry Bird moment that you recalled years after it happened, just so inspired by that courageous effort. So I still feel it when I see things from before my time or before my time as a fan, but when you can watch history happening live, really cool. So please keep sharing those memories, but in the meantime, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Also, both we and the NLSC are on social media and would appreciate a follow. So, Derek, go and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep a look to the NLSC itself, NBA-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, Thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.